morning and welcome to the first episode of the second season of the Ziboli Round Corner. I am your resident host, Lebogang Mashego. I'm sure you haven't been seeing us on your screens for a while, but we're back in full force, bringing you all things ESG. And today is no different. We are talking about a very important topic, which is ESG. And I had nobody else to do this with other than our amazing MD, Ms. Mbumi Cooper. How are you today this morning, ma'am?
I'm well, thank you. I loved it when you said resident host. You know, I'm going to hold you to that, right? But it does feel like we're both back from sabbatical.
Yes, it's been quite a long time. But anyway, we are back here today talking about ESG. Last year, we did touch a little bit on ESG, but I think it's important to keep the conversation going so that people remain aware, knowledgeable, and they try to incorporate it as much as possible. So I think let's get right into it. What is your definition of ESG? So what is ESG in its current context?
Yeah. So I think first, I don't love acronyms. I never assume that everybody knows what the acronym stands for. Yeah. So I think as a start, ESG talks about environment, social, and governance. What it really is a framework that helps one translate what they're doing under those three legs into a measurable numeric or metric that different stakeholders can interpret when they're making decisions. These stakeholders can be investors, they can be regulators, but they can also be clients. So if as a client, it's important to me what you're doing for environment, social, and governance, the ESG framework is a mechanism that helps me to be able to objectively make a decision around whatever the score or this result is that it returns. And under environment, it's really your practices on how do you take care of your environment as a result of your business activities. So if you're in a space where you're making furniture and you have to chop down trees, are you replacing those trees? But of course, it looks different in different environments. Social really looks at what you're doing for your people, your community, your employees, your suppliers. And then governance is, what are your anti-corruption practices? Are you operating ethically? Do you have fair practices, whether it's at a board level or at an individual level or even at a supplier level? So are you really a responsible corporate citizen? But instead of telling me in words, tell me in a way that I can measure.
Do you think that it's different from what we've had before? I think as you were explaining it, I'm one of the people that could say this sounds familiar. We've had the triple bottom line, we've had triple Ps, and we have SDGs, all of these things that we are meant to align ourselves to.
Yeah.
Does ESG bring anything different to this mix?
Yes, I think ESG brings a couple of things. I think, first of all, ESG does not fundamentally introduce any new concepts. So you're right, it should sound familiar. But what it does do is it brings everybody to the table. So if environment, where you went when we were talking about it, was thinking about the time where we were very heavily on what's your carbon footprint?
Yes.
What are your carbon credits? There were a lot of buzzwords around that. But the point is, it was measuring the extent to which, if you're extracting from an environment perspective, what are you giving back in order to balance out what you have done as a form of harm to the environment? So you will recognize those terms or those concepts or those measurement mechanisms. And then on social, ideally, the first place your brain goes is the likes of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in the context of South Africa, triple BEE, right? But also beyond that, you can also look at things like corporate social responsibility. But all of these, you will start to recognize you weren't really measuring it. Nobody was really saying, what are the points or what is the score that you can get? But it was more about what are you doing? So again, it was very narrative driven. It was very commitment driven. It was very intention driven. But what ESG says is, to the large extent, you've already been doing these things. But what's the so what? And what is the quantifiable, comparable way that you can bring your score, I can bring my score, and we can say, oh, okay, you're doing better than me in this respect. I think for me, that's what really ESG has brought to the fore. It's brought everybody to the table and it says quantify it. And then let's be able to compare it.
In our context, I think we can find ourselves in the S. I think for a while when ESG was the new kid on the block. We were seeing consultants, we were trying to figure out what this thing means, and as Zivoli, we were trying to plug ourselves into it to figure out how we can add value to our clients. And I think the natural place where we could align ourselves to was the S.
Mm-hmm.
But as a layman, as someone in a community somewhere, what do I attribute to the S in ESG? How do I say, oh, this is why this corporate is doing this. This is because of this pillar.
Yeah, I mean, what social really looks at is it's almost your social impact, your social value addition, or your social extraction. But what it is about is it's primarily about the community. But my thing is always, if you were to walk into this place called a community, what are you going to find? You're going to find households. You're going to find individuals. You're going to find small businesses. You're going to find infrastructure. And so social really looks at all of those things. Is the community better for your role in it? What are you doing for the people? And people is both inside your company and outside. So what are you doing for your employees, but also what are you doing for members of the community at large? What are you doing for your suppliers? Are you adopting inclusive procurement practices that enable me as a local supplier to work with you? Are you adding infrastructure that we need in this community? Is the community as a whole better for your presence? So that's really what social looks at. Have you had an additive impact within our community because of your presence and your commercial objectives?
Do you think that implementers have a role? Do we have a role? Do we have a responsibility in ensuring that the social impact strategy comes alive? Is there something that we can do as the implementers?
There's something we should do. So what is the role of the implementer? At the core, it's to execute a program successfully. But for me, it's like, it's not that simple, right? Because programs live inside environments, so to speak. So typically where our journey starts with a corporate client is they have some form of expression around their intentions. So whether it's a social impact strategy, whether it's an ESG goal, whether it's an ESD strategy, but they do have like some sort of goal that they've set for themselves, and they've said, this is how I want to positively impact SMEs in the space in which I operate. Our role is then to translate that into a well-designed program that will enable them to achieve that. But as I said, a program exists in an environment. So is the relationship between the corporate and the community a relationship of trust, of mutual respect? So in other words, if we implement this program, are we going to be able to do so successfully because the environment in which we're implementing the program is conducive? Number two, are the interventions inside of the program such that we will be able to enable the client to achieve their end goal? And typically the end goal is something around inclusive procurement. Thirdly, are we tracking and extracting the right data that will enable the client to objectively measure the extent to which they're successfully achieving their overall goal? Again, typically around inclusive procurement. But I do think that whilst at the end of the day, what we want to do is unlock procurement opportunities for these small businesses, there is a ripple effect to the benefit of programs. And all of that is the stuff that we do in between in order for us to get to this end goal of unlocking inclusive procurement.
Okay, that sounds good. So you're saying that ESD programs in specific have a role to play in the S in ESG. So I think what some corporates might struggle with is thinking that ESD programs or ESD is almost it's this child that they don't know where to put, whereas I think it's
a lever. I say if your ESG objective, therein you have anything that talks about supplier diversity, inclusive procurement, local procurement, and you take that and you overlay it over the BBB scorecard, what you're going to find is the preferential procurement scorecard, and what you're going to find is enterprise and supplier development. So I then say view those two as levers to the achievement of your supplier diversity. So if you were to come to work every day working towards achieving supplier diversity, where you should be tracking your progress towards that is through your preferential procurement scorecard and your enterprise and supply development scorecard. But those are levers that you're pulling. And this is your impact statement that you want to get to.
Yeah. Is there success? So is there utopia? Is there a place where compliance and social impact meet? I mean, impact, one would say it's a bit more expensive. It means that I have to do more, I have to pay more attention. Whereas compliance, you can really do like the bare minimum and be compliant.
Yes.
Is there a place where you could really put social impact and compliance and let them coexist?
Yes, yes, and you should. Look, I feel as South Africa Inc., we're in the very fortunate position that dating back to 2007, we've had the BBB Codes of Good Practice. And granted, when the codes came out, and to some degree even today, it was positioned as heavily on the compliance side.
Yes.
Why? Because you comply, well, you implement that which you do under the respective scorecard elements because you're working towards this BEE certificate. So by virtue of the manner in which it was positioned, it lends itself to you adopting a compliance lens. Here's what's interesting for me personally. I used to reject the idea that ESG should sit with compliance in an organization because my concern was always it will be, again, very compliance driven, and there'll be a missed opportunity on everything else that it brings to the table. But I think what I've quickly come to realize and appreciate is that ESG is a measurement of risk, because the person that you're engaging with is risk profiling you through what you've done. So let me go back to the example. So we have BBBE that has almost led us in the same direction. What is good about that is, as South Africa, we are not sitting with debates of where to find the money, the commitment, in order for us to be able to realize our ESG objectives. What we're saying is bring the two worlds closer together. No matter what your relationship was with your scorecard, no matter how you felt about what you're spending towards achieving the points, the point is you were ring fencing those budgets and you were demonstrating that commitment because every year you needed to have a BE certificate. Change the lens through which you look at it. Don't look at it heavily as a compliance thing because then you're ticking a box. Start to look at it as the opportunity to overlay your primary compliance objective with a secondary social impact objective. So take the same scorecard and bring environment, bring social, bring governance, and overlay them. And what happens there is your so what starts to evolve, so that you can better integrate that into your broader objectives. But it shouldn't fundamentally change what you've been doing before. In fact, it almost gives you the opportunity to start to tell the story about the impact of why you're doing what you've been doing under BBBE.
Yeah, so it's not or it's not, this additional reporting requirement now. I think it's just, it helps you highlight, it helps you categorize, and it organizes. Say, I've been doing some of these things, but this is now what they look like.
And this is why I was doing them, right? So if the BBB scorecard is the what, for me, ESG reporting and narrative is the why.
Yes. Are there examples of where this has been done perfectly, where compliance and social impact almost come together, or ESD and ESG come together? Are there success stories?
Yeah, I think, again, in South Africa, we're fortunate that we've already been doing this, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So if I can then, again, use the BBB scorecard as an example, and I will talk only to the development scorecard elements, because I think that's where the bulk of the opportunity sits. We have skills development, which says, are you skilling individuals inside and outside of your company in order to either prepare them to secure a job or to improve the quality of the job that they have secured? That sits under S in ESG.
Yes.
And then when we look at preferential procurement, it says, are you buying from small businesses and are you buying from Black-owned and Black women-owned businesses? That's inclusive procurement. That's local procurement. That's diverse procurement.
Yes.
And then we look at enterprise and supply development, and I'm going to distinguish between the two. Enterprise development says, are you capacitating SMEs that have an interest in securing a procurement opportunity, ideally with you, but not necessarily? in such a manner that they can become onboarded as a vendor and indeed secure that opportunity. Supply development says the SME that you're working with, are you capacitating them in such a manner that they can improve the value and the quality of the procurement opportunity that you're giving them? And then socioeconomic development, that essentially speaks to the extent to which the efforts that you're putting forward under socioeconomic development are putting the beneficiary of those efforts in a position that they are better able to income generate. All of those really find expression under the S in ESG.
Yes.
So for me, if the rest of the world is a little bit shell-shocked when it comes to interpretation, articulation, commitment to ring fencing of budget for ESG, South Africa is a couple of steps ahead. Again, what we really just need to do is move from the what, I need to tick these boxes so that I can get my BEE certificates, to the why, I want to improve quality of jobs. I want to stabilize communities. I want to stimulate SME participation in the formal economy. I want to stabilize the spaces in which I have a presence and in which I operate. That's really the evolution of from the what to the how, or to the why for us as South Africa, I believe.
If a corporate had a theory of change, or they were thinking of putting one in place, is there a way they could potentially use it to almost make sense of when does ESG become ESG?
Yeah,
in the context of a theory of change.
Yeah, so in the context of a theory of change, that has a social impact lens, right? So again, we're in the fortunate position that because of the work that we've already been doing for a different purpose, what we've actually done is build out almost the equivalent of a framework for ourselves. What do I mean by that? So if on the one end, you have an ESG program, and on the other end, you have SMEs that have secured enough procurement opportunities to have created stable communities, right? So that is the equivalent almost of a theory of change. So if we start at the ESG level, what is happening here? Enterprise and Supply Development says, what are the programs or initiatives that I should be implementing to get SMEs to this point? So at the ESG level, we say we need to do mentorship, we need to do training, we need to provide them with tools and resources. So if we liken those in the context of a theory of change to the inputs, so we're going to gather these Lego pieces called training and mentorship, etc., and we're going to take those Lego pieces and we're going to build out a program. We're going to have SMEs entering this program, and what we're saying is, if we take those inputs and we do something with the inputs, we're going to have an output. That output is going to be better informed, more knowledgeable, more confident SMEs. And as a result of that, we're going to work them towards an outcome. And the outcome is, because I'm now more confident, knowledgeable, etc., I'm better able to to approach corporate for the purposes of securing opportunities. The outcome then of that is I have one or more procurement opportunities that I've locked in. As a result of that, I'm able to employ more people. As a result of that, I'm able to give people decent, dignified employment. As a result of that, the community is better for it. But at a corporate level, you say, okay, great. So those are the outcomes that I'm starting to see. I'm starting to see more small businesses thriving, creating more jobs, creating more stability. But what it does for me is I can say, yes, I have achieved my inclusive procurement objective at a corporate level. But you can already see that it's that in itself results in other domino effects at a community level. So that for me would really be the framing of it through a theory of change, so that you can see the natural relationship between ESD and ESG.
And one would ask about measurement and reporting. As you've said, that we are in a fortunate position where we have the BE codes of good practice, and that really sets a standard. So this is how you ensure that you are compliant to BEE. Whereas with the ESG frameworks, there are frameworks, but they haven't been finalized, announced. There's no, this is the all and mighty framework. How does a corporate then say, this is my measurement tool? So this is my meaningful measurement to ensure that I am aligned to ESG.
Look, there are a couple of frameworks that exist already. So that's good news, right? I think what we're fussing about now is which one is the right one, like which one is the gospel truth, right? And I think my encouragement would be, let's not get too bogged down in that, because you, as a corporate, you're likely to have chosen one already. So you're measuring it one way or the other. What I think we need to pay attention to, though, is the matrix that matter for you. So if we use the triple B codes, we're already measuring that which resides in there. But I do think we need to take it a step further. So if we use employment equity as an example, employment equity says, how many people are you that are reflective of the economically active population are you employing in senior, middle, and junior management? I think that what ESG gives us the opportunity to do, and again, in the context of S, is to say, are those jobs dignified? Are they sustainable? Are they above minimum wage? Do you adopt fair labor practices? So those are the indicators that we should be then paying more attention to under ESG. But the matrix for me, in the context of our work, if we look at what we're doing for small businesses, we're already measuring spend when it comes to ESG. We're already measuring spend when it comes to preferential procurement. What we should be measuring is the impact thereof. And where that lies for me is the social return on investment. What is the, if I spend 100,000 rand developing Lebogang, what is the ripple effect of a better, knowledgeable, confident, capable Lebogang? And that should speak to the procurement opportunities that she's starting to unlock and the growth in those procurement opportunities. So if my hypothesis is that my program will help you secure more opportunities, then my measurement has to be, if I meet you 3 years from now, first of all, are you still operating? Secondly, has your revenue grown? So not, is it just there? Has it grown? And I don't think we're doing that enough. We're not checking in multiple years thereafter to say, are you still in existence? Are you growing? And what does growth look like for us? Of course, it will include revenue and jobs created. But in addition, I think we also should then follow the 1 rand procurement opportunity, let's say 1 million rand procurement opportunity that you secured, the number of jobs you created, and the ripple effect of this fact that there's now households that are getting an income from the revenue that you secured. You secured that revenue as a result of the program that you were in. I think we do need to follow that domino effect more, because that is where the depth of the impact is going to come from. What the matrix becomes, I think, will differ in different industries, because I think emphasis in different industries is different. An industry that lends itself more to blue-collar workers is going to have a very different matrix to a more white-collar industry. But we should be challenging ourselves on the domino effect of the rand that you invest either in development or the rand that you afford from in terms of a procurement opportunity.
Right, insightful. To our viewers at home, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section, and then we'll be sure to respond at the end. We are almost at the end, but of course, we need a word of advice. So if you had all of this advice and all of this wisdom, what would you say to corporates to say this is how you incorporate ESG into ESG? What would that word of advice be?
I think for me, start with the end in mind. We talk a lot in South Africa about the cost of compliance. And it's a complaint, right? All of us are annoyed and agitated by it. And so I think for me, then we need to change the lens through which we see some of these things. Triple B is not going to go anywhere in the short term. We know that. In fact, it shouldn't, because what we're learning is a powerful lever to what it is that we're trying to do at an ESG level. What's nice with ESG is the higher your score, at a practical level, the lower the cost of capital. And so as a business, you're going to start to feel the impact of that at a very tangible level. But my suggestion is always start with the end in mind. If you have a business strategy, I think be very deliberate about unpacking your strategy in such a fashion that you will recognize what the social components are in that strategy and what the role then is of the likes of enterprise and supply development in that. Your business strategy may be attracting more investors, demonstrating elevated regulatory compliance, or locking in certain clients. And in order for you to do that, you're going to have to improve your ESG score. And enterprise and supply development suddenly moves you away from this one line in your annual report that talks about your social imperatives to a very defendable, tangible, measurable, comprehensive objective. And so I think don't miss that opportunity. It may have started as a price tag driven compliance requirement, but it is deeply integrated into your strategy if you need to engage external stakeholders that are going to speak to you through the lens of ESG. So I think corporates need to then start to bring those two worlds closer together and move it away from a compliance conversation to an opportunity unlocking conversation.
Yeah, and even with business strategy, I do think that it's quite internal and employees will understand it and, it can be socialized internally. What about the community? What about beneficiaries, participants, people that corporates are supporting? How do they find themselves in this ESG narrative? Are they able to pick out a letter? Is that how it works? Or how do they just understand that, okay, this is where I belong and as a community member, as an SMME in the term ESG?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think one, as the community member, organization, SME, as a stakeholder that lives outside of the company,
yes,
I think you almost need to adopt the narrative. I always say, speak to your audience in a language that they understand. And if ESG is the buzzword, you cannot come at me using a different emphasis because I'm not going to hear you. So it then becomes important for you to educate yourself about it. But I do think also as external stakeholders that want to engage corporates, it's becoming increasingly more important for you to understand where you stand on it. So if I were to measure you, and I'm not saying go and buy a subscription to some framework tomorrow morning, because I don't think it needs to be that structured.
Yes.
But I do think that even if you were to go at it as a checklist, you need to start marking off for yourself, to what extent am I finding articulation in environment and social and governance? And how do I fare in those? And therefore, how do I articulate that to a corporate as I'm engaging them? So that's the second thing I would do. But the third is, if I am pitching, whether it's for business, whether it's for partnership, you must be very clear on where you're double clicking for the corporate. So the corporate can say, oh, okay, this is solving my inclusive procurement. This is solving my fair labor practice. This is solving my infrastructure projects in communities. So even when you're pitching or engaging corporates for partnership or support, I think as a stakeholder, external stakeholder, supplier, you must start articulating yourselves in terms of where do you fall in their overall ESG goals.
Thank you, ma'am. Always insightful. Thank you. To our viewers at home, if you have any questions, queries, if you need any guidance, please be sure to reach out to us. We are here to assist you. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. We'll see you next time on the Zibuli Round Corner. And remember, Zibuli exists to bridge the gap between SMEs and corporates, because we want to be sure that supplier diversity remains business as usual. Until next time, enjoy your day.